1, 2, 3. Wait, let me get my film on. Let's get another one. Just hit me. Don't hit me.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, hazers in the club yet. That's one of them. One of the things that we feel is very ceremonious is that... Isn't there another one?
One of the amazing things about movie making that I love and why I like doing it is that you can explore an idea and contextualize it in a lot of different ways, and even in ways that you don't agree with, because it's like a movie space and people understand that in a story, you know, there's characters that are gross, there's characters that are doing things that you would never do or never want to do and wouldn't get behind, but you can explore it, and it's sort of like a safe space in a way where it doesn't have to be a statement. It can be a landscape of opportunities of thought and invention rather than answers, and it can be very political, but not necessarily have to be activist, you know? But I feel like with movies, there's this, we're trained to think of them as encompassing many points of view and many voices, and the ability to do that is exciting.
Don't fall. Please don't. And don't push anybody else off the boat. It's not part of the contest. What is not? I like that. You can say it makes a little noise. This is 30, but it's not 30. No.
I never really thought about doing art. I didn't know anything about contemporary art, or that there was even a layer of art happening in that sense. And I thought I was going to make movies or be in plays or something and be in bands. And I always played music, played the piano. And when I moved to this farm town, they didn't have as much of that, those types of classes, but there was this incredible art teacher there named Mrs. Ladd. And I took her classes, and she was just, you know, kind of the person who was like, all these things you like doing, they can all be art. And she told me about like art schools, and that's when I decided to apply to art school. And in high school, I basically made costumes and staged like weird scenarios and games and photos and music. And so I kind of thought I wanted to like make movies. And so I got a camera senior year after seeing like the Blair Witch Project, because that was like, you know, seeing a movie that was like pretending to be real, but that was fake, was really interesting at that time. And like just the consumer cameras that were out at that moment, and how they had this like version of night vision on them. And so I got one. And in that town, there was like this tradition that I thought was so insane. It was like where the juniors and the seniors would have, in the fall, they would go drive around the town torturing each other, like kidnapping each other, lighting each other's yards on fire, breaking stuff. And it was like just this like weird relationship to, I don't know, like in a small town, it's like a bubble, and like there's certain just traditions that you just like exist, and they're just okay because they've always existed. And to me, it was like just completely outrageous and amazing, and I wanted to film it. So I was like, let's pretend we're making a fake movie that's real, but actually be making something real. But, you know, because it was like, people were, when I first started bringing the camera around, people were like, why would you be filming this? This was way before you were able to stream anything online. It was like 1999. So people's understanding of a camera was like, either you're making a documentary or you're using this to narc on us. Like, this is just gonna get us in trouble. There's nothing good that can happen from this. And just people's relationship to the camera was really interesting at that moment, because, you know, people, when people got comfortable with it, they just started narrating what they were doing. There wasn't this like sort of meta savvy relationship to it yet. It was like very like, I either have to act or I have to narrate like I'm in a documentary, but like that's it. There's no like all these other layers that came later with like social media and the ability to stream. I guess that was my first experience with like script writing, because in a lot of ways it was like instigating. It was taking something that was already happening and then kind of trying to instigate it to be more narrative and be more sculptural or something. And then I revisited that footage in 2013, which kind of led to the Priority Infield movies. Because I was shocked when I looked at the footage. I forgot how much our behaviors have evolved in relationship to camera and talking.
Where am I supposed to go?
Oh, you're just gonna go with me.
I wouldn't trust that.
No, I'm trusting it because I've done it.
Do it again.
Hey, turn that fucking camera! I have you. Oh shit!
Oh my God. Don't film me.
I'm gonna go record people.
The camera, the camera.
None of that.
Hey, dude, I'm right here.
Don't take me.
Get up there, camera.
See, he's my property.
Oh my God.
The point is, just kind of keep it calm.
Get that camera out of here.
Put it in your pocket right now and shut it off.
And if you don't want night vision on, you just slide this forward. Yeah. Well, I don't know. It says record there. Language has always been the thing that inspires me the most. It's like more the rhetoric around things and the language that's used to like occupy a sensation or a vibe or like a premise, and how like people always think that the work's like about the internet and social media, but I don't think it is. I think it's more about how our behaviors change and our language skills and what our tools are and our understanding of ourselves and our bodies, and like what the potential inventive space of that can be in relationship to our humanity as we sort of grow these extensions of ourselves.
We are really walking a fine line. In fact, our line might be so fine that we might be seen as failing in a safe space. Look at that safe space. So many safe spaces fail these days, especially since we don't have safe words in this safe space. So that's just one of the things I wanted to remind myself about, because I don't have a notebook. I don't believe in journals anymore. I write things on the backside of my eye.
So I applied to RISD, and I didn't really have any expectations. I just knew that I wanted to make movies, and I got there. And for a while when I was there, I thought, oh no, actually I want to make animations and sculptures. But then I majored in FAV, which is film, video, and animation. And I know that departments changed a lot since I was there, but it was, when I was there, it was fairly like a tech major in a lot of ways. It was like you learned equipment and software, which was what I wanted out of school, because I wanted to because I tried editing in high school, and it was like the way, like importing the footage and all these, it was like, I didn't learn about iMovie until college. And when I entered college in 2000, it was like hard drives were getting smaller and you could actually like carry them around. And like, I'm sure maybe iMovie existed before then, but I think that was when I found out about it. And we were supposed to learn to Avid. I never learned it. I was like, I'm doing this at home. Like that was bullshit. Like it was like this weird digitization of film or something. But the first video I ever did was Lizzie made a bunch of sculptures, and Lizzie Fitch, and it was just this really simple assignment about editing. And the movie was called Kitchen Girl, and it's basically just her running through the house with these sculptures that kind of are almost like proxies for children. And she's sort of just ranting through the house and throwing things out the window, and like in a sort of a fit about something that you don't really see or understand. I met Lizzie in a hallway in the dorms, and I think she was like, "Fuck art school." Like, but I was like dorkily excited to be there, because it was like really new to me to be around so many people who were like making things and stuff. But she was like, I don't know. I've always thought she was really, really inspiring, and just the way she does things and thinks. And when I first met her, we had conflict. We like didn't mesh necessarily, but then we got the same job and we were working in an art store and then we just became like best friends. I mean, I think that like Lizzie and I have just a strong collaborative bond. And with the movies, I would always start writing scripts. And so far I've always written the scripts, but you know, someday that might change, I don't know. But there's never been like a direct formula. So that's one of the things that's stayed the most consistent. Like I'll start with a script and then she'll start, like we'll be talking about the scripts. You might see some of the scripts or hear me talk about them, and she'll start working with materials in a very script type way as well, because I consider like the sets and the props to be scripts also. And we actually collaborate on a lot of that. Like it's not like as simple as Lizzie builds and I write and film. We collaborate on those builds, but sometimes she just does them on her own and then we can join the script to it, or we do it together, or I do it. And then there's the directing, which typically I direct the movies, but the way these movies are made, it's not like a clear thing. So it's like Lizzie will just like chime in and like hijack the directing whenever she wants, and it's awesome when it happens. And also the actors will do that too. They'll be like, oh wait, can I do this? Because I feel like I should do this right now. And I'll be like, okay. So we had the script as more of a backbone, and that the directing, my role in directing is to constantly bring things back to the backbone, but to allow for tangents to happen and for allow the collaboration of the performance to evolve in relationship to both the written script and the sculptural script and the props and the costumes and just the casting dynamic. And these collaborations aren't set in stone, and like with each project, we usually don't like to define what the authorship is or the title until the very end, because a lot of times someone will come in with the intention of playing a big role and then they end up not, and then someone comes in with the intention of playing a very small role and then they end up playing a huge role. And so it's kind of always a negotiation when we get an opportunity, because it's like we can't define it yet until it's done.
Hey Mama, Dad, what are you looking at?
Son, you need to give it up, yeah. This family is poisonous, yeah. You need to find a new home.
Yeah, Mom! Snake. Mama is a snake. Yes, she is. Mama's a snake.
Mama is a snake.
She is.
She is.
Family Fights Entertainment was the movie that I shot in 2003 and 4, and yeah, it was a senior project at RISD, and many of the people in it, like Allison Powell and Lizzie Fitch and Rhett LaRue, Lindsay Beebe, are all still a huge part of the work, even to today. And I still live with like Lizzie Fitch and Allison Powell. And I mean, at that time, I still didn't think about the art world, because you know, in my department, we didn't really go and look at galleries and museums and stuff. So I thought that I was imagining that I was going to use this movie to apply to film festivals. And the way that it sort of got into the art context was because I was making all these DVDs of it and just mailing it to random people that I would meet on Friendster, and just like meet people and just be like, what's your address? And I'd just mail them a DVD. And this was before YouTube, so you couldn't really stream video successfully at all yet. And at the time, it was like a lot of what I was trying to do with the camera and with the acting, it was like sort of, you know, the consumer cameras started to be able to flip the LED screen around. And when people first started seeing that movie, a lot of like the conversation around it was like, why are people acting this way, and why are they looking at the camera all the time, and all this stuff that is so natural now. And like the tools and stuff were there for a long time before like YouTube allowed it to like explode. But like just what that does, the relationship to like how people sort of like divorce accents from geography and start to use them as supplies, and the way like people are more aware of how body language is a collaborator of spoken word, and how also like the position of your body in relationship to a lens and relationship to when you're talking to the lens because you're talking to yourself versus talking to the lens because you're talking to a group and a single person simultaneously. And I really wanted to explore all those different behavioral modes that were sort of emerging, but then also make a movie where like I don't know, I've always been interested in movies where it's like an assembly cast or like where a group dynamic is more of the main character than like an individual person, and that like characters are like frames or titles and they're like vehicle threads that like create a mesh of linearities rather than, I mean, a lot of people think of the movies as nonlinear, but I think of them more as like a mesh of linearities or like a multilinear constellation that where the ideas and the stories sort of like congeal in memory space rather than while watching it. It's like watching it's more of like a ride or an obstacle, and the story starts to get thread together, maybe in a more nonlinear way as you come back to it and revisit it and remember it and experience things that like relate to it in the world. Because I also try to, when it comes to like inspiration and references, I like them to be as muddy as possible. I want it to be like digested information, like secondhand, like run through like the psychological mud and like to emerge in a way that's like foreign to itself and like a reflection of culture or a particular idea in culture or a thread that is in a state of contradiction that's sort of like has like a unique association to what how you're used to seeing it.
Drink it too. Oh my God!
Never.
You spilled that drink on me.
I would never.
I would never.
I would never.
Look at the camera. You spilled the drink.
I would never.
I like to think of a lot of the characters as gender indifferent, or that they're they're asserting like an extreme position on gender, or they're treating gender as like an inventive space, as something that is fluid and that you do not need to be consistent in, that it's just a construct, and it's as fluid and lubricating as language itself. So it's like language and gender, it's like they're both like spell casting. It's like magic. It's an invention that then creates reality and agreements. And so I feel like everybody the characters in the movie might assert their position on gender, but it's not it's like a moment of agreement. It's a reality that's a moment. It's an intersection or a pivot. It's not their. No one feels rooted in any of these things in the movies, because the movies kind of are somewhat sci-fi, but they're more like adjacent sci-fi. It's kind of like a present side rather than like a future or a past. But like in the same sense as the way gender's fluid, it's like the future and the past are both like exploratory, inventive spaces that are where there is no grand narrative and there is no other, because if everything's an invention and everything can set its own terms, and then the whole concept of otherness is sort of meaningless. And so in some of the newer movies, characters are actually in a state of being lost and feeling like their agency is stripped from them, and they're actually conforming to stereotypes to try to, I guess, like using the act of being stuck and being like oppressed or abused as like a recreational space, like a game. Like it's like, in a future where if we ever do evolve past like all of the social constructs that we've like put on ourselves, I would imagine that there might be a moment in time where people indulge in like very limited realities because it's fun, and it becomes like a therapeutic recreational game or space. And so like in Center Jenny, the way like sexism is explored is like really, it's very simplified and it's very generic and basic. And the idea is that like all of these Jenny's are actually like they're game pieces, and like the people who are actually experiencing this sort of like AI experience are probably outside of it, and they're multifaceted and multi-fluid, and this is like a consciousness or a psychology that they're experiencing as a game.
Here at the Occupy Zombie movement, I love playing baseball when there is no one around.
For Lake Anticipation, the starting point was like we got this amazing opportunity from Marciano, the Guest Foundation, had bought an abandoned Masonic Temple in Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard, and it had been like abandoned, I guess, since the 90s, and at a certain point it was like had graves in it or something, but it was pretty much untouched. And he told us about his space and was like, do you guys want, I'm gonna demolish this, do you guys want access to it until I demolish it and you guys can start the demolition? He was basically like, do whatever you want. He gave us a key basically, and we were able to pretty much live in there for 4 months and like camp and stuff. And the building had like, you know, like building sickness, because it was like, the Masonic Temple is like, I guess, very, I didn't research the Masons and I don't care about that content, but it was interesting to be in the shell of something that matters to some group of people, this like club, but then to like not research it, not have any understanding of it, and then like utilize the form of it and to acknowledge the form on its own terms. And in a lot of ways, we were thinking of the building as the protagonist, or it was the building itself was the main character of this piece, which normally it's always a person or a group of people.
Okay, wait, come on. Let's all get back in, and you have to stand there and tape us getting in. You have to be in it. Bakir, I just wanted to say, like, I know that I gave you a hard time about hiring a videographer for our haunted adventure, but I think that, like, after finding this binder, I'm really happy that he's here, because we're gonna be able to remember this in so many much more profound ways than we would have been able to. So, I mean, just get the fuck in the elevator. What the hell, God? Come on.
What we did was we wanted to shoot it in the surround like it was a virtual gaming environment, and we tried to take like the setup of like a lot of like horror movies that have like a group dynamic. Like often there's like some sort of like legend or some sort of story that everyone talks about and they think it's not real, but they make a joke and they want to explore it, and then they go explore it, and then the shit hits the fan. But that like that introing of like the group dynamic, thinking everything's funny, we really wanted that to be like the main energy of the movie, and for it to never actually go into a story. And this idea that like all these characters are living in a reality where the game only lasts for 2 hours, and everyone has a 2-hour experience, but your 2 hours can start whenever you want it to, and no one wants it to start, because it's way more fun to talk about the game and to articulate it and to be in the state of introduction rather than to actually arrive at an end. So like everyone is sort of like stuck in this haunted space where they become ghosts or guests or hosts. And this idea that you're never actually fully in player mode, and you're never actually want to initiate a reality because you don't want to have to commit to anything. Their whole existence is anticipation.
Danny!
Hey guys, did you heard that? It like just sounded like there was just something up there. Danny, do you have excellent hearing? Cause like
the next 2 hours is gonna be so much fun.
It really doesn't change what we're gonna do. So let's just go have fun for 2 hours.
Porter!
Okay.
Danny!
And I wanted to explore the script more as like a premise, or like a list of instructions, or like a physical space and a way to interact with it. And one of the things that we did in the process was we didn't let people see the building until they were shooting. And so their experience of actually exploring this space, we were using their real, because it was a scary building, there's not many windows. It feels like the part of a hotel that is like for the convention center part of like a Holiday Inn. So there's no windows. It's like these big rooms that like seem to be for like some sort of meeting, but it's like stripped of all of its arrangement of furniture. It's hard to understand what it was used for. And so we were trying to use like that discovery moment of like the first time people see the basement, and then like insert lines and be like, now say this and now say this.
No, we're going this way. Come on. God, guys, I think we're going this way. God. We'll get there. No, it's this way. God, you don't know. Guys, it's this way. God. Morgan, God, I never knew you were such a jackass.
Well, don't think too much.
Who cares? Let's go. I love this. Okay, guess what? Jim told me that's an old toilet. Okay, so this is really serious, so be careful.
You know, we like designing the movies to be native to multiple different platforms and exhibitions, ways of exhibiting and screening. So it's like when you show a movie in a movie theater, you bring your knowledge of like understanding that a movie has a beginning and an end, and that like you're watching scenes and you're watching character development, and so you put that onto the movie, and whether it's there or not, it emerges because I feel like I really want like the people to read the movies and to be like ambitious about reading them. And then in the museum space, it was like an opportunity to create some sort of like a sculptural frame or a container that poetically resonates with the movie, sort of like lubricates your own psychological like landscape that you're going through while experiencing a movie, and like conjoins them, and so you're like more in it.
Another one? Someone was already in here. Ow! I just found this. Look what I just found. Yeah, it was in that tent over there. I just found it.
Fuck them.
You want to climb up there? I don't know. I think that they. Well.
Oh, watch out! Oh, what a slut! That was so insane.
No, it's fixed though.
Stupid slut.
That was a haunted ceiling moment, guys. Address the fact that the ceiling just had a haunted moment. This wasn't that serious. No one got hurt. I mean, come on.
I mean, I think of life as very sculptural. Like people's personalities are sculptural. They're trying to create. People try to create an architecture or maintain an architecture that makes them feel like they exist, and that their life is engaged with something, and that their ideas can be real even when they're not participating in them. And I feel like just the way we're negotiating, becoming more flexible in the self and what the self can be and where it exists, and how the different places the self can exist have to like reconcile like the books, you know, because you're like have all the different modes of being. It's not just being in physical space anymore. And I try to edit not all the movies, but a lot of the movies in a way where, you know, the first experience might be more of a visceral one, and you're like navigating it more kinetically or musically, and then at a certain point maybe you like dive down and get into the pace of it and start to actually read the language and the words. And I think of the movies as something you read like a poem, and I like to think of like it's like a total read. Like you bring all of your baggage to it, you bring all of your ways of understanding the world, and you use that as your own personal filter to interface with the movie and take a read from it. And I want people to get to the place where it's not about the visceral, it's about the language and the humanity and the emotion and the exchanges and the interactions and the moments. And yeah, and you have to read those. It's like reading.
Fellow pantomimers and guest speakers alike, I think it might be time for us to take the rain tarps off the tent. I thought it was gonna rain, but it's not. I'm the only one here with a child in the